My name is Lyla Sanchez, and the day I watched my mother sob into my Ring doorbell camera, begging for money she didn't deserve, I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt, just the cold satisfaction of watching someone reap exactly what they'd sown. She stood there in her designer coat, the one I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago, crying about being broke, about how I'd abandoned the family, about how cruel and selfish I'd become. But I wasn't cruel. I was free. And she had no idea I was watching from 2,000 miles away, sipping coffee in my new kitchen, finally at peace. Have you ever been invisible to the people who were supposed to love you most? Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with revenge. It starts with hope. It starts with a girl who believed that family meant something, that blood was thicker than water, that love was unconditional. I was that girl once, naive, trusting, desperate to belong. I grew up in Phoenix, the middle child in a family that perfected the art of conditional affection. My older brother Marcus was the golden child, charming, ambitious, always getting bailed out of his mistakes. My younger sister Vanessa was the baby, spoiled and untouchable. And then there was me, the responsible one, the one who paid her own way through community college while working 2 jobs, the one who sent money home when dad's business failed, the one who showed up to every family crisis with solutions while everyone else showed up with excuses. By the time I was 28, I'd built a decent life. I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized tech company. Nothing glamorous, but stable. I lived in a modest apartment, drove a used Honda, saved aggressively. I was the family bank, the emotional support, the problem solver. When Marcus got a DUI, I paid his lawyer fees. When Vanessa's boyfriend left her pregnant, I helped with rent and baby supplies for months. When mom needed dental work, I put it on my credit card. They called me their rock. I called it love. But love, I learned, is only love when it flows both ways. For them, I was an ATM with a heartbeat. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday in March. I'd been offered a promotion at work, senior analyst, better pay, better title. It required relocating to Seattle, a city I'd always dreamed of. When I told my family over dinner at mom's house, I expected excitement, maybe even pride. Instead, I got silence, then guilt. Seattle? Mom said, her face falling like I'd announced a terminal illness. That's so far, Lyla. It's a huge opportunity, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I'd be making almost double. Marcus snorted. Must be nice. Some of us have actual responsibilities here. I stared at him. Marcus, who I'd bailed out more times than I could count, who still lived rent-free in mom's guest house at 32, was lecturing me about responsibility. What responsibilities? I asked quietly. Family, Lyla. Or did you forget what that means? Vanessa chimed in, bouncing her toddler on her knee. Who's going to help me with Mia? You know I can't afford childcare. I send you money every month, I reminded her. Money isn't the same as being here, Mom said, her voice trembling. We need you. But the way she said need didn't sound like love. It sounded like obligation, like ownership. I took the job anyway. I gave them 2 months' notice, helped Mom set up automatic bill payments, left Vanessa with 3 months of prepaid childcare. I thought distance might help us reset, might force them to see me as more than a resource. I was wrong. The move to Seattle was hard, but exhilarating. New city, new apartment, new life. I'd rented a small house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy but mine. I had a doorbell camera installed for security, updated my address with the family, sent photos of my new place. I waited for calls, for texts, for any sign that they cared about my new chapter. Silence. Days turned into weeks. I reached out first, sent pictures of the Space Needle, told them about my new team, asked about Mia's birthday. Short responses. Cool. Nice. Busy. Talk later. The later never came. I stopped reaching out, partly to see what would happen, partly because my heart couldn't take the one-sided effort anymore. A month passed, then two. My birthday came and went without a single call from any of them, not even a text. But my phone did buzz that day, with a Venmo request from Vanessa. $300 for emergency car repair. I stared at that request for a long time. Then I declined it. For the first time in my adult life, I said no. The message that followed was immediate and vicious. Seriously? I'm your sister. I can't believe how selfish you've become. Mom was right about you. I didn't respond. I muted the conversation and went to work. Life in Seattle was good. My job was challenging and fulfilling. I made friends, real friends who invited me to things because they enjoyed my company, not because they needed something. I started therapy. My therapist, Dr. Chen, was the first person who ever asked me why I thought I had to earn love by being useful. I didn't have an answer. That scared me more than anything. 4 months after moving, I came home from a work happy hour to find my phone flooded with notifications, 37 missed calls, dozens of texts, all from family. My heart hammered. Someone must be dead or dying. I called Mom back. She answered on the first ring. Lyla, finally, where have you been? What's wrong? Is everyone okay? We need your help. It's urgent. Not, we missed you. Not, how are you? Just need. What happened? Your father and I are being evicted. The landlord is selling the property and we can't find anything in our budget. We need first and last month's rent. Security deposit. About $8,000. $8,000. My stomach dropped. Mom, I don't have that you just got a big promotion. Don't lie to us, Lyla. Marcus saw on your LinkedIn that you're a senior analyst now. Of course he did. Probably the first time he'd looked at anything of mine in months. I'm saving for a house, I said carefully. I can't or won't. Her voice turned cold. We're your parents. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. And now when we need you, you turn your back? The guilt was immediate and crushing, years of conditioning kicking in. But underneath it, something new stirred. Anger. Where's Marcus? I asked. Where's Vanessa? Why is this on me? Marcus is struggling with his business, and Vanessa has a baby to think about. You're the one with the good job, the big promotion. You're the one who moved away and abandoned us. Abandoned. The word cut deep because part of me believed it. I'd left. I'd stopped sending money. I'd built a life that didn't revolve around their needs. Was that abandonment? Or was it survival? I'll see what I can do, I heard myself say. I wired them $4,000, half of what they asked for. It hurt financially, but it hurt more emotionally. Because I knew it would never be enough. And I was right. The text started within hours. 4,000 isn't enough. We need the full amount. How can you be so selfish? No thank you. No gratitude. Just anger that I hadn't given more. That's when something inside me broke. Or maybe it finally healed. I looked at those messages, at the years of one-sided sacrifice, at the way they only reached out when they needed something. And I made a decision. I blocked all of them, every number, every social media account, complete silence. The freedom was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. For weeks I jumped every time my phone buzzed, expecting somehow they'd gotten through. But they hadn't. They couldn't. I'd built a wall, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one doing the emotional labor to scale it. Dr. Chen helped me process what she called justified estrangement. She explained that family isn't defined by blood, but by mutual respect, support, and love. That I hadn't abandoned anyone. I'd stopped allowing myself to be used. That choosing my own well-being wasn't selfish. It was survival. I threw myself into my new life, made senior project lead within 8 months, started dating a kind, emotionally available software engineer named David who thought my boundaries were healthy, not harsh, began running, training for a half marathon, found a community of people who saw me as a whole person, not a solution to their problems. I was happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy, and I stopped waiting for my family to ruin it. But they tried. 6 months after I'd blocked them, I came home from a run to find my Ring doorbell had recorded motion. I pulled up the app absently, expecting a delivery driver. Instead, I saw my mother. She looked older, tired. She stood on my porch 2,000 miles from Phoenix, crying into the camera. Behind her, I could see Marcus's car parked on the street. "Lyla, please," she said to the camera, her voice breaking. "I know you're angry. I know we've made mistakes, but we're desperate. We've been evicted. We have nowhere to go. Your father is sick. We need help. We need you. Please, baby, please just talk to us." I watched the whole video 3 times, looked for something in her words that felt like actual remorse, like she saw me as a daughter, not a bank account. I didn't find it, because even in her desperation, even in her tears, it was all about what I could do for them, not who I was to them. They didn't have my new address. I'd specifically not shared it, which meant they'd gone through considerable effort to find me, to show up uninvited, to pressure me in person when virtual silence hadn't worked. I checked the timestamp. They'd arrived at 2 in the afternoon. I'd been at work. They'd waited for 4 hours, ringing the doorbell periodically, leaving more tear-filled messages. When I didn't answer, they finally left. The next morning, 3 more videos. Mom again, more desperate. Then Marcus, angry and entitled, demanding I stop being dramatic and help my family. Then Vanessa, holding Mia up to the camera like a prop, saying she couldn't believe I'd turned my back on my own niece. Mia. Sweet Mia. I felt a pang seeing her face, but I also knew that if I opened this door, I'd be back in the same cycle. They'd take and take until I had nothing left to give, then resent me for being empty. I didn't respond. I saved the videos and went to work. They came back twice more that week, each visit more desperate, each message more manipulative. They tried every button they'd installed in me over 28 years: guilt, obligation, fear, shame. But something had shifted. I'd spent a year learning that their emergencies weren't my responsibility, that their poor planning wasn't my problem to solve, that I deserved better than being loved only when I was useful. On their 4th visit, they brought my father. He looked frail, definitely older. He stood silently while Mom did her usual routine, crying and begging. But at the end, he looked directly at the camera and said something that made my blood run cold. "You were always a selfish girl, Lyla. We should have known you'd turn out like this. You're a disappointment. No plea, no vulnerability, just venom." The mask slipped and I saw what I'd always feared was true. I was only valuable to them when I was serving them. Anything else made me selfish, disappointing, wrong. That night, I did something I've been avoiding. I called my Aunt Teresa, my mom's older sister. We'd never been particularly close, but she was the only family member who'd reached out when I moved to Seattle. Just a simple, "Congrats on the new job" text, but it was more than anyone else had done. "Lyla," she answered warmly. "How are you, honey?" "I'm okay. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course." "Is Dad actually sick?" There was a long pause. Too long. "What have they told you?" she asked carefully. "That he's sick, that they were evicted, that they're desperate." Another pause. Then, "Lyla, your father is fine. He has high blood pressure, takes medication for it. But he's not dying or anything close. As for the eviction, your mother and I had coffee last month. She mentioned they'd decided to sell their house. Got a decent offer. They're moving to a smaller place by choice, not force." The floor dropped out from under me. "They're lying? I don't know what they've told you specifically, but they're not in crisis. They're downsizing. And honestly, they should be. That house was too much for them anyway." "Why would they lie?" Teresa sighed. "Sweetheart, I love my sister. But she's always had a way of dramatizing things to get what she wants. And you've always been her go-to for fixing things. When you moved and stopped being available, I think she panicked. She doesn't know how to function without you to lean on. I felt nauseous. So all of this, the begging, showing up at my house, using Dad's illness, manipulation, Teresa said bluntly. And I'm sorry. You deserve better than that. You've always deserved better. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in my dark living room, watching the doorbell footage again, watching my mother cry on command, watching Marcus rage, watching them perform desperation while living comfortable lies. They'd driven 2,000 miles to manipulate me, had probably spent more on the trip than they were asking me to give. It was never about need. It was about control, about making sure I stayed in my role as family savior, no matter how far I ran. I could have responded with anger, could have called them out publicly, torn apart their lies on social media. Part of me wanted to. But I'd learned something in therapy. The best revenge is living well. The strongest boundary is indifference. So, I did nothing. Didn't respond to their messages. Didn't confront them about the lies. Just continued my beautiful, peaceful life without them in it. But they weren't done. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unknown Seattle number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ms. Sanchez, this is Detective Morrison with SPD. I'm calling about a welfare check request we received concerning you. My heart sank. A welfare check? Yes, ma'am. Your family filed a missing persons report, claimed they haven't heard from you in months and are worried about your safety. Obviously, you're fine, but I need to close out the report. Can you confirm you're not in danger and that you're voluntarily not in contact with your family? They'd called the police, filed a false report, weaponized law enforcement to force contact. I'm perfectly safe, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I'm voluntarily not in contact with my family. I'd like to make that very clear. I do not want them to have my contact information, my address, or any access to me. They've been harassing me. Understood. I'll note that in the report. If they file again, we'll have this conversation on record. I'm sorry for the intrusion, Ms. Sanchez. After he hung up, I sat trembling. They'd escalated. They'd tried to use police intervention to force me back into contact. It was unhinged. It was desperate, and it crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I called an attorney the next day, explained the situation, the harassment, the showing up at my home, the false police report. She listened carefully and then said something that changed everything. You have grounds for a restraining order, but more importantly, you have documentation of harassment that constitutes a pattern of behavior. If they escalate further, you're protected legally. And honestly, sometimes the threat of legal action is enough to make people back off. I filed for a restraining order, submitted all the doorbell footage, the text messages I'd saved before blocking them, Teresa's statement confirming the lies. Within 3 weeks, I had a court order prohibiting my mother, father, Marcus, and Vanessa from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. The process of serving them the order was handled by law enforcement in Phoenix. I wasn't there to see their reactions. I didn't need to be. I'd said what needed to be said in the clearest possible language. Stay away. For 2 months, they complied. My life returned to its peaceful rhythm. David and I got serious, started talking about moving in together. I ran my half marathon, finished in under 2 hours, got another promotion at work, started therapy less frequently because I needed it less. Life was good. Then my doorbell rang. Not the camera alert, actual physical ringing. At 11 o'clock at night. I checked the camera feed first, my heart hammering. It was Marcus, drunk by the looks of it. He was screaming at the camera. You think you're better than us? You think you can just erase your family? You're nothing without us. We made you. You owe us everything. I called 911 immediately, gave them the address, explained about the restraining order, stayed on the line while they dispatched officers. Marcus was still raging at my door when the police arrived 8 minutes later. I watched from my camera as they arrested him. The violation of the restraining order meant Marcus spent the night in jail. He was released on bail the next morning with a court date and an explicit warning. Any further contact would result in serious charges. But here's what happened next, the part that still amazes me. He called Mom from jail. She called the attorney who'd handled the restraining order, trying to argue that I was being unreasonable, that Marcus was just upset, that family should work things out. The attorney informed her that she was now also in violation of the no contact order by calling on Marcus's behalf, that any further contact from any of them, direct or indirect, would result in additional legal action. They finally got the message. Or maybe they finally ran out of energy. Either way, the harassment stopped. The silence that followed was different from the silence of moving to Seattle. That first silence had felt like neglect. This silence felt like peace, like the door to a burning house closing behind me while I walked toward fresh air. David and I moved in together 6 months later. We adopted a dog, a goofy golden retriever named Biscuit, who had no idea he was supposed to guard anything but his food bowl. I made new traditions. Thanksgiving with David's family, Christmas volunteering at a shelter, New Year's Eve watching the fireworks from our rooftop. Holidays stopped being sources of dread and obligation. A year after the restraining order, Teresa called me. We'd stayed in occasional contact, friendly but distant. "I thought you should know," she said gently. "Your mother asked me to reach out. Not on her behalf. I told her I wouldn't do that. But she wanted you to know that she's in therapy. They all are, actually. Family counseling. She said she's starting to understand what she put you through." "Good for her," I said, and I meant it, not sarcastically. I genuinely hope they got help. She asked if you'd ever be willing to reconcile. I told her that's entirely your decision, and she needs to respect whatever you choose. "Tell her." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Tell her I hope therapy helps them, but I don't need them to apologize or change for me to be okay. I already am, and I'm not interested in rebuilding something that was never healthy to begin with." Teresa was quiet for a moment. "That's fair, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. What you did took courage." After we hung up, I realized something profound. I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself, didn't feel obligated to give them another chance, didn't feel like I was betraying some sacred family bond, because the bond they claimed we had was based on my servitude, not my worth. And I'd spent too many years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. 2 years after moving to Seattle, David proposed during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands. We got married in a small ceremony surrounded by friends who'd become family, the kind of family that shows up not because they need something, but because they want to celebrate your joy. Teresa came. She was the only blood relative in attendance, and that felt right. On my wedding day, as I got ready with my chosen family around me, my phone buzzed with an email. I almost didn't check it, but something made me look. It was from my mother. The subject line read, "I understand now." I stared at it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading. Part of me was curious. I opened it. "Lyla, I know I have no right to contact you, and I'll understand if you delete this. But I'm in therapy, and my therapist suggested writing letters I may never send as a way to process things. I decided to send this one because you deserve to hear it, even if you don't respond. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for treating you like a resource instead of a daughter. I'm sorry for only reaching out when I needed something. I'm sorry for the doorbell incidents, for the manipulation, for not seeing how badly I was hurting you until it was too late. You were right to cut us off. You were right to protect yourself. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were never the problem. We were. And you deserve so much better than what we gave you. I hope you're happy. I hope you found the peace you were always searching for. You earned it. Love, Mom. I read it twice. felt the words land in places that had been raw for so long. It wasn't enough to change anything, wasn't enough to make me want them back in my life. But it was something. Acknowledgement, ownership, a small crack in the wall of denial they'd built. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. I saved it in a folder and went back to getting ready for my wedding. As I walked down the aisle toward David, toward the life I'd built from scratch, toward the family I'd chosen and the happiness I'd fought for, I felt something release in my chest. The last bit of guilt, the final thread of obligation. I'd spent so many years believing I was selfish for wanting to be seen as more than useful. But choosing myself hadn't been selfish. It had been sacred. That night, dancing with my husband under string lights while our friends cheered, I caught my reflection in a window. I barely recognized the woman looking back, confident, joyful, free. She looked nothing like the exhausted girl who used to sacrifice her own happiness to keep everyone else afloat. And that was exactly who I needed her to be. 3 years have passed since I moved to Seattle. 3 years since I stopped answering the calls, stopped sending the money, stopped setting myself on fire to keep others warm. People ask me sometimes if I regret cutting off my family. If the revenge, because that's what some people call it, though I never saw it that way, was worth it. But here's the thing they don't understand. Walking away wasn't revenge. Revenge would have required me to stay engaged, to plot their downfall, to derive satisfaction from their suffering. What I did was simpler and harder. I chose peace. I chose myself. I built a life where my value wasn't determined by my usefulness, where love didn't come with invoices and guilt trips, where boundaries were respected instead of trampled. Did it hurt? God, yes. Does it still hurt sometimes? Absolutely. Grief isn't linear, even when you're grieving people who are still alive. But the pain of choosing myself was clean, purposeful. The pain of staying would have been endless and meaningless. Last month I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting, Vanessa's. I held it for a long time before deciding to open it. Inside was a single photo. Mia, now 6 years old, holding a drawing she'd made. On the back, Vanessa had written, "She drew this for Aunt Lyla in Seattle. I tell her stories about you sometimes. She doesn't understand why you're not around, and honestly, neither did I for a long time. But I'm starting to. I'm in therapy now, trying to be better for her than we were for you. I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I put the photo on my fridge. Not because I'm planning to reconcile, not because one apology erases years of damage, but because it reminds me that people can grow, even if it's too late to salvage what was broken. And because Mia deserves to know that somewhere, she has an aunt who loves her enough to stay away until the family she's growing up in is healthier than the one I left behind. Sometimes David asks me if I think they'll reach out again, if I'll eventually let them back in. I tell him the truth. I don't know. Maybe someday, if they do the work, if the dynamic fundamentally shifts, if there's space for a relationship built on mutual respect, instead of one-sided sacrifice. But I'm not holding my breath, and more importantly, I'm not holding myself hostage to that possibility. I built a beautiful life from the ashes of what I thought family was supposed to be. I learned that blood doesn't make you family. Love, respect, and reciprocity do. I discovered that the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself when everyone else demands you choose them instead. Last week, I ran into someone at the grocery store who recognized me from family photos online. She knew my mother somehow, distant connection. She stopped me in the cereal aisle with this pitying look and said, "I heard about your family situation. It must be so hard to be estranged. Family is everything, you know." I smiled politely and said, "You're right. Family is everything. That's exactly why I had to let them go." She looked confused, but I didn't elaborate. I just continued shopping, biscuits food in my cart, ingredients for dinner with David's parents tomorrow, a bottle of wine for the game night with friends this weekend. My cart was full of a life they'd never understand, one where I didn't have to earn the right to exist, one where I was enough just by being me. That's the thing about walking away from toxicity disguised as family. It looks like loss from the outside, but from the inside, from where I'm standing now in the life I built for myself, it looks like freedom. My name is Lyla Sanchez, and I don't regret a single choice I made. Not the move, not the boundaries, not the silence. Because the girl who bent herself into knots trying to be enough for people who would never see her value, she deserved better. And the woman I became when I finally believed that, she's everything that girl dreamed of becoming. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's knowing when to let go and walk toward the light, even if you have to leave people behind in the darkness they refuse to leave. And sometimes revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building such a beautiful life without them that their absence becomes a blessing instead of a wound. You can't pour from an empty cup, but more importantly, you don't owe anyone the right to drain you dry just because they're thirsty.